and welcome to the Philosopher's Compass podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Alexander Kunz, and I am the creator of the Stoic Mom blog and Substack, and the co-author of Beyond Stoicism and Live Like a Philosopher. Today, my guest is Ken Davenport. In his early 40s, Ken was a successful entrepreneur and CEO with a serious happiness problem. Looking for more meaning, he quit his company and began a journey that led him to helping military veterans with their transition to the civilian world. It also led him to co-founding Mission Edge, a social impact nonprofit in San Diego. Ken discovered the power of Stoicism as a tool for identifying what really matters in life and building resilience, and has published books including The Stoic Transition, The Stoic Edge, and most recently, the Virtue Ethos Handbook. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Meredith. Great to meet you. And I'm talking to the Stoic Mom. It's so exciting to me. It's one of the first things that I found out there, particularly as I was struggling with my son, in his teenage years, and was very helpful. So thank you for writing that.
I'm super excited to hear that, Ken. I always put my work out there and hope that maybe someone will read it, maybe someone will find it interesting, and I'm super thrilled to hear that it was of interest and that it helped you in some way. And do you consider yourself a Stoic dad?
I'm absolutely a Stoic dad, 100% now. But I can't always say that. And my son reminds me of the transformation that I made and how helpful it was to our relationship. So he actually said that to me last night in the kitchen. So
wow, amazing. Do you mind if I ask how old your son is now?
He's 20 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a journey. I have kids around that age too, and it's now they're young adults, so it's a really different time.
Yeah.
But going back in time, I'd love to hear how you first got interested in philosophy and in Stoicism in particular.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was always kind of I was always fascinated by kind of existential questions about life. Like, why am I here? Like, what are we doing? What's the purpose of this? Why am I doing this thing on any given day? I would often have these very esoteric conversations with myself about it. And I grew up in a non-religious house, and so I think as I got older, I began to kind of look for things to hang on to, in terms of philosophy of life, like not having organized religion. And as you get older, things get more complicated and more stress. And then you start to ask even more existential questions about, like, well, why am I doing this?
Right.
What's the purpose of this? So I think I was probably always geared towards existentialism in a lot of ways. And I think my dad, who's an atheist, I think he would probably define himself as an existentialist. So that was kind of my natural proclivity, but it left me wanting, I think, for something a little bit more purpose-driven and with a little bit more structure. And I think Stoicism ended up sort of fitting that bill really well for me.
And how did you first encounter Stoicism?
Well, it's kind of by accident, really. And I write about this in the Virtue Ethos book. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine from graduate school, and she had really gone through a very tough period in her life, and she seemed so calm. And I was having conversation with her, and I was saying, like, how do you do it? Like, you really feel, it seems to me like you really got it all figured out. And she's like, she rolled her eyes and she said, hardly. This has been a hard process, but I have some philosophical touchstones that I kind of rely on. And she mentioned Marcus Aurelius, and I thought, you mean the guy? This is literally what I said to her. You mean the guy in the movie Gladiator? The
Right.
Richard Harris. He played Marcus Aurelius. I know that. And she rolled her eyes again. And she said, "Man, you need to do some reading." So she told me, she said, get your phone out and write down meditations and go get it. And so I did. And it really changed things for me. And I kind of toyed with Stoicism for a few years. And then when COVID happened, I really dug into it because here in California, you're in California, COVID was, in some states, COVID was kind of a non-event. I have friends in Florida and Arizona. It's like, yeah, it was, I mean, it was something, but it wasn't what it was here in California. And, I had a 14-year-old at the time who was supposed to go to high school and ended up sitting at home for a year. And boy, there were a lot of things that I felt completely out of control. And I had to shut my company down. And there was a lot of just kind of anxiety about the things that I didn't really understand what was going on. I needed something to kind of hang on to. And I went back to meditations, and it sort of did a deep dive and went like just straight down the rabbit hole from there. And I think it really helped me during that time to kind of regulate, my frustration and realize that, look, I can't control what the state of California is doing or what the virus is doing. I can only figure out kind of how to show up every day and be as good a leader for my team and good a parent and good a husband as I can be, even when I wake up and kind of wonder, like, how did this happen and what is going on? So it was, I think COVID, I kind of attribute, my Stoic transformation to COVID.
Yeah, yeah. I think that would resonate with a lot of people. For me, I got into it earlier on, really really deeply starting in 2016.
Hmm.
But when COVID hit, I think a lot of it was, how do we help our kids get through this? And you mentioned about your son. I mean, my kids similar. Like, I had a daughter who was a freshman in high school. I had a daughter who was a sixth grader, and these are prime years for them to be with their peers, to learn
Hmm.
from their teachers, and it was really, really challenging,
Yeah.
to kind of help them through it and to see them suffer through that. Also, for me personally, for example, my work went completely online for my job, and it was just so much chaos and so much, what can we do? How can we pivot? How can we still keep, working and learning and doing all the things while there's this, literally global sort of catastrophe happening? So it was a very prime ground for Stoicism, I think. And like, how did you weave in Stoic concepts to your everyday life as you faced that and other things that you've dealt with?
Well, it was interesting because as I learned more about, Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius in particular, although, I'm a big fan of Epictetus and Seneca as well. So it's not just about Marcus Aurelius, but as he dealt with the Antonine Plague, there was a lot of, I got a lot of solace out of the fact that, hey, like, this isn't the first plague that we've had. And that plague actually was much, much dramatically more damaging and deadly than what we went through. But, it's like what's old is new. And, it's all part of the human condition that there's things that we have to deal with that we don't have control over. So that gave me some solace, actually. And I think that Stoicism has become a daily practice. I think one of the reasons why it appealed to me is that it's something that you have to remind yourself of every day. You don't read it once and then say, oh yeah, that was interesting, and then move on with your life. You have to battle your instinctive nature to react first and think later. And I think we all are very hyper focused on reactivity now because we have very short attention spans, and the phone, I think, has rewired our brains in ways that don't make being stoic, practicing stoicism a natural activity any longer. And so we really have to slow down. And one of the things that dawned on me is that I needed to kind of have a daily kind of practice and devotional to Stoicism if I was going to actually do it on a daily basis. Because I would get up and I come to work, and then I would get wrapped up in things at work, and I'd start to immediately kind of react in my old ways. It's almost like you have to retrain yourself. And so I use it, funny, using AI, I created an app for myself that I've shared with a few friends, which is really a daily Stoic leadership quote and journal prompt. And so every morning before I do anything, I read it and I think about it. And I may not always do the journal prompt, but I often do. And I may only write a couple sentences, but it gets me out of bed, priming me for the day, thinking about something other than I got to go get my coffee and then I got to get to work because I have a 9 a.m. meeting. And so it really is kind of a tool. It's an intentional toolkit that I think everyone needs to cultivate for themselves. A lot of what I write about in the Virtue Ethos Handbook are exercises to kind of start to kind of groove that into your daily life. And I mean, obviously, Ryan Holiday's done a lot with daily Stoic journal and all of that. And I think there are lots of tools out there that people can get. There's a ton of Stoic books out there.
Right, right.
So, the things that I really practice on a daily basis is obviously the dichotomy of control, which kind of underpins everything that I look at and everything that I kind of assess. But the one that really has helped me a lot is, kind of Seneca's discussion on anger has really helped me a lot. I struggled, I think, in periods of my life with reactivity and anger. And I think one of the big challenges I had with my son was kind of this conflict sort of oriented relationship that I would have with him where, it would kind of get escalated and then there would be a lot of anger and then the anger would kind of really distort the discussion that we're having and lead to a lot of unintended consequences. And so anger management was something that I really needed to kind of embrace and deal with. And, so I'm reminded a lot that, what did Seneca say? The effects of anger are always much greater than the causes, and that the antidote to anger is delay. And so I kind of have learned to take a lot of deep breaths and a lot of channeling of, trying to get my prefrontal cortex to come back online when my limbic system is overactivated and not allow myself to act before I think. And I really attribute a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot of, brain chemistry and a lot of psychology in there, but I mean, I really attribute my ability to do that with some of the Stoic concepts. And it was always interesting to me that 2,000 years ago, where they knew virtually nothing about the brain, they understood brain science really, really well, like very, very well. And then the other one really that I have told my son a million times, and it's actually the one thing that he really did kind of take to heart is, the idea that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And, I think a lot about how, I'm anticipating and I'm imagining and it hasn't happened yet. It might not happen. Maybe I shouldn't suffer before it happens. And really kind of continually remind myself that, hey, let's deal with it when it happens. And when it does happen, it's not going to be the end of the world anyway. But if it hasn't happened yet, let's not project onto it and let's not suffer it before we have to. And let's not suffer it in your mind unnecessarily. So those are three things that I really think about a lot and use on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's great. I think this anger topic is really huge and needs a lot of attention. I know that I've heard quite a bit about it from some of the Stoics I look up to, like Donald Robertson, for example,
Yeah,
is writing quite a bit about it.
yeah,
And I think that it also goes against the current culture, which is, there are a lot of companies and corporate interests out there that are thriving on stoking anger and fear and
absolutely,
hatred. And so it's we literally just have to rebel against that and reject that in order
absolutely.
to become better, people, better humans, right?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things that I love about Stoicism is the whole, justice is a virtue. The whole idea that we're all part of the human race. As Massimo, talks about, we're cosmopolitan people, right?
Yes.
We're part of the human race, and we really are geared towards working together and ultimately trying to love each other. I think that the whole idea of justice as a virtue, it's not, it's obviously it's not a legal construct. It's more, everything we do should be for the greater good, and we should be thinking about our fellow human beings and trying to do good for the community. One of the Marcus Aurelius's quotes, and I've heard it in many different ways. So it's something around, what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. What's good for the hive is good for the bee. I'm not sure which But anyway, that whole concept, I think, is a beautiful thing, and I think it really is the antithesis of this hyper emotional, dopamine fueled kind of idea that, we should be mad about all these things. First of all, we don't know anything that's really going on. Like, we don't really have any idea what's actually happening, but
Yes.
we're very upset about what we think is happening, right?
Right, right, right.
And it's so destructive. And I think Stoicism, one of the reasons why I think it's had a resurgence, is because we're living in a time where we are subjected and pummeled by information. And I don't think the human brain is really meant to live like this. I think, I often tell my colleagues at work, most of them who are, 20 years younger than me probably, but, I tell them about how, my parents, who were, very active, and very, intelligent people, but my dad got up and went to work and came home, and maybe he read the paper in the morning for a little bit, and maybe he watched Walter Cronkite on the 6 o'clock news. But otherwise, he was just kind of living his life. People were like doing what was in front of them.
Yes.
And while my childhood certainly wasn't calm, it wasn't tumultuous because of that.
Right,
And
right.
I think about how unnatural it is kind of for us to kind of have so much information every minute, where our brains are kind of scrambled.
That's right,
Um,
right. I think that's true, Ken. And I think we all have this, well, at least most of us have this negativity bias, right? We're looking for the threats. And that is a human instinct. We are trying to preserve our lives and ourselves through, figuring out what could threaten us and endanger us. But now we're kind of doing it globally every minute of the day. And I agree, it's very unnatural, it's very stressful. And I think people either get really hyper engaged in it or they just tune out and they
yeah,
just can't handle it, which is both of which are really understandable. So bringing some, stoic thinking to it. Also, I really liked what you shared about kind of it goes back to like the thinking fast and slow. I actually did chat with Massimo about this when I saw him recently. We were talking about those two systems of the brain, which we now have a lot of studies on. The Stoics didn't in ancient times, but they were smart and they really understood
hmm
how we think. I believe they were,
uh,
kind of these
totally.
proto neuroscientists somehow.
They totally were.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
totally agree. I really
Yeah.
do.
So it's really important. I mean, that's something where I wasn't really aware of that at all. I think kind of growing up and in my education that, you could have these sort of knee-jerk reactions that were maybe from, yeah, just sort of your reptile brain or whatever it is. And then you really, really have to work on yourself to get to the point where you transform that into a really decent thought or like a good judgment or
hmm
a choice you can actually make actively. Bring your agency into it because
Yeah,
otherwise we are being controlled by these ancient systems in our brains in a modern world that's not designed for any of that.
yeah. Well, I love the quote. Put your impressions to the test. Like, don't just accept what you're hearing. I mean, this is something they talked about 2,000 years ago. Don't just accept what you're hearing at face value. Like, put it to the test. Say, hang on here. Like, what am I hearing and what am I seeing? Is this real or not? And wow, that's such a beautiful, powerful thought right now. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, 100%. Now, as the Stoic mom, I do have to follow up on your previous comments about working with your son. Do you have any kind of examples that come to mind of where you realized, oh, okay, maybe I could approach this in a manner more,
Yeah.
in keeping with my Stoic life
Oh,
philosophy or something that, you were inspired by?
yeah, 100%. So a lot of my relationship with my son from the time he was probably 13 to 17 was me lecturing him and telling him what he should do, and being upset with him with the things that he wasn't doing, and how I had it all laid out for him that, like, this is the path. And he really didn't want to hear that, and would not be able to really articulate that, other than that he would get upset, and then we would go toe to toe, and then we would have these knock drag out yelling matches. And I think I started to realize that, on the anger thing, I finally came to the conclusion that, anger takes away your power. And what I mean by that is my ability to influence him and my ability to actually teach him was completely destroyed by getting angry. Because when you get angry, now the focus is on your anger. So, the classic thing would be he would go to my wife and say, "What's wrong with dad? Like, he's so activated, like, he's so upset. Like, why are you so angry? Like, maybe you need therapy." And that probably was true, and I ended up getting therapy. But my point is that it really distracted from my ability to influence him, because no longer were we talking about the issue, we were now talking about the reaction.
Mm.
And that was like a kind of a light bulb moment for me when I realized that, oh, I'm going about this all wrong. And then the one day that I finally realized it, we were going to go somewhere, probably go play golf, and he said, does every car ride have to be an opportunity for a lecture? Is
Mm.
what I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized, oh my God, like he doesn't even want to get in the car with me, and I don't blame him, because who
Yeah.
wants to be lectured all the time? So I had my wife and I sat down, and like I realized that I have the answer here, and it's in Stoicism. Like, I cannot control him. I cannot control what he does and what direction he goes in. I cannot control, his reactions to things that he's dealing with. All I can do is be calm and be a source of support and open up, and so that he will come to me. So I'm not going to him, but create space so that he can fill the gap. And once I backed off, he actually started filling the gap, and he started actually coming toward me. And it completely transformed our relationship, but it also transformed my life, because I suddenly wasn't activated all the time and frustrated and disappointed, and because he wasn't going to college, and because of this, and because, it's like, oh my God, like I realized I had to live my own life. I have to focus on me, and all I can do is show up as the best dad possible. And that doesn't mean telling him what to do. It means being there as a support when he needs support, and allowing him to make his own mistakes and allowing him to make his own decisions. I really credit Stoicism for a lot of that epiphany. And I will tell you, my relationship with my son is 100 times better than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that's an important realization that a lot of us as parents, if we kind of adopt a stoic mindset, we start to see that we're kind of fed this line that we should be somehow in charge of everything about our kids, about their lives. We need to form them into some sort of product, or,
Yeah,
if everything they do reflects on us, or we have to somehow take it personally. And all that stuff is things I've worked on a lot with this, my work on the Stoic Mom and Stoic parenting in general.
yeah. Well,
So, yeah.
I think it's, as I think about it, I mean, that, the whole helicopter parenting generation is relatively recent. Like my parents, I'm telling you, my parents, you know, they were around, and I think they knew that I grew up in their house. But beyond that, like I really didn't. I was a free spirit and a kid who raised himself in a lot of ways. And my parents were busy with their own lives, and I think, and I think even my wife and I probably helicopter parented too much, and we're very intrusive and very, very interested in what our kids are doing every minute of the day. I don't think that's good. I think you got to find the balance of saying, hey, like, you got to live your own life. Let your kids live their lives. They're going to make mistakes. The only way you learn is to fail, and let them fail. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they can learn that in small ways as young kids, I think it really helps them later on, as opposed to
Totally.
putting all the pressure on themselves, like, I've never failed, I can't fail at this. And
Yeah.
my daughters in their high school and their college, they're witnessing that from some of their peers, where a lot of it's even goes beyond helicopter parenting to like bulldozer parenting,
Yeah.
where the parents like literally are just paving the way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and setting it all up one thing after the next. And it's really not good for kids. That's my personal perspective. And I'm working on this longer project now about stoic parenting, because I think it's something that people can really benefit from thinking about. And it's a really strong rebellion against what we're
Yeah.
seeing out there with helicopter parenting, with intensive parenting, bulldozer parenting, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
destroying a lot of relationships, to be honest, or it's making our kids much more anxious and
Yes.
unhappy and
Yes.
just unsettled. And there's a lot to say about that. But
Yeah.
getting back to Stoicism and you, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how practicing Stoicism has changed your life.
Wow. It's made me a much calmer, kinder person. I think, 20 years ago, people who worked for me wouldn't recognize who I am today. And actually, the best compliment I've gotten a few times with my staff here at Mission Edge is they've said offhand comments around, you're so chill, like you're so calm. Like that to me is, you couldn't say anything better to me than that, because for so long I was so hyper activated, and very driven, but driven in a way where I had to control everything, and I think I alienated a lot of people in my life during that process. So it's really made me much calmer, much more understanding, and I think much more inquisitive about this mystical life that we lead, and the whole kind of all the things that we don't really understand, and how beautiful it is to not really know, to not know everything, and to not understand everything that goes on, and not need to understand everything. Sometimes it's okay to just say, I don't really get that, but it's kind of neat the way it's worked out, and I'm just going to go with it, and not have to kind of overly analyze everything.
Mm.
And because we don't have control over most things, and I think that again, it gets back to this whole idea that we really control very little, very very little. Like almost, all you control is like you getting out of bed at the right, get up early, get out of bed, and like start your day. That's about where your control ends, I think. You know, and so it's made me a little bit more wondrous about the world, and about
Mm.
how just, you have to engage all the things that happen to you, even if they're bad. And I've had a lot of, I've had some successes, I've had some failures, I've had some things, but at the end of the day, all those experiences have been so formative for me, good and bad. And I think I kind of revel in the challenges that come along, because it kind of, it makes you realize that you're alive, and you're engaging, the things around you.
Wow, that's interesting. I think I relate to what you shared because I was just thinking recently about my email and how I used to really dread opening my email because I thought, oh, something bad would be there, or someone would be criticizing me, or work or other things, and I just thought, oh God, how am I gonna, like I literally just dreaded my inbox. And now I do have a different frame of mind. I mean, I've personally worked on myself in a range of ways and
Yeah,
gotten to a point where maybe it is just that idea of, I wonder what will be there. Like, what's the discovery of my email today
yeah,
going to
yeah,
lead to? And yeah, someone might say something and I can't control what they say. They
yeah.
might complain and they might not like something I did, but oh well, I did the best I could in the moment I was in, and I can explain that if I need to. But it's really is a mindset shift. So yeah, away from both the anger and also I think for me like the anxiety piece too.
Yeah, I think part of it for me is, and this was a big transformation for me, is not taking everything personally. Not everything is a personal slight or a personal reflection of me as a human being. Like I can't own other people's reactions. As long as I show up in the way that I want to show up, and I do the best job that I can, I can't control how other people like react. Some people don't like your books. Like some people don't like your reading. Like you get a 1-star review. You're like, my first reaction is, well, then you write the book. Like if you, if you, like where's your book?
Right, exactly.
But then I realized that like people, I can't control that, and it's not a reflection on me as a human being. And I think it really transforms the external to the internal, and really kind of makes you focus on, that which you can control. And some of it's creating that, that inner citadel or whatever, that idea that you can't be touched by things that aren't in your control. And really, other people's opinions are their opinions. It's their problem. It's their issue. Now, if their opinion is negative because you did something, or you said something, or your actions contribute to it, then you got to own it, obviously. But a lot of times, people just don't like the look at you or whatever, and they're just, I don't know, they're like they have a problem today. And I actually feel, and maybe this is a Marcus Aurelius thing, I actually have empathy for them. It's like maybe there's something in their life that's going on that's really negative, and they really are just in a bad way. I feel bad for
Yeah.
them, but it's
Yeah.
not a reflection on me. And
Right.
I think
Right.
the more we can not take it personally, the more we can let these things roll off our backs in a way where, we're not angry about stuff that really we shouldn't probably be angry about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's huge, Ken. And I think that also stems from us realizing if we realize that our self-worth is not based on what some random person thinks of us, right? It's based on, are we developing our character and living by the virtues? Are we being as, using our reason as best as we can? Are we being pro-social? Are we embodying the four primary Stoic virtues of
Yep.
practical wisdom, justice or fairness, courage, and temperance or self-control? I mean, this is why I think it's so powerful. And to me, that goes way beyond the dichotomy of control, where a lot of people kind of stop in Stoicism. They're like, oh, yeah, there's things I can't control, which is very important, very important. Don't get me wrong. But I think if you go deeper into kind of the virtues, as well as the disciplines of ascent, right? And you think about, what do I actually want? What are my actions going to be? What are appropriate actions?
Yes.
And then what do I kind of make in the world with my will and so on?
Yes.
I mean, my
Yes.
agency. And this is a very, very powerful way of thinking. And it sounds like it transformed not only your relationship with your son and your family, but also your work. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your work and how you weave stoicism into that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. My staff, I think, have all become Stoic just by my through through my talking about it a lot. My work is, I work in the social sector now. I left a long entrepreneurial career, started this company, Mission Edge. We're a nonprofit, and we help other nonprofits really with capacity building. So we do back office support, HR, accounting. We have an accelerator program for small businesses in underserved markets here. That's kind of our philanthropy that we do. But so we're in a very challenging space with a lot of people who really are working hard to try to make the world a better place, and have often very little control over whether they get money, whether they get funded, or whether their programs are actually effective. And so for me, this is a little bit of a microcosm of the beauty of kind of thinking about, how do you live a virtuous life? Like, what do you put your time toward? And, how do you then understand kind of where your time is best spent? What activities will have an impact, and what things will not, or will be maybe even be a negative? And just in terms of how the culture that we've created here is really around, being courageous in the sense that we're going to stand up and try to help people do really gnarly, hard things, knowing that we won't always succeed, but that we're really committed to, um, devoting our time and energy to kind of trying to solve some of these problems, even though if we're not the people on the ground doing the work, we're helping those who are.
Mm.
And so the virtues, it's funny. We had a retreat a couple weeks ago where the whole company came in, and I talked about virtue, and I talked about building trust, and I talked about the relationship between you being a virtuous person and having your customers trust you, and having people in the company trust you. Like, you have to be a person of your word. You have to have empathy. You have to be consistent. You have to, you have to have self-control. You have to use wisdom to understand, when is this a time to intervene, or this is something worth talking about or letting go, and then having the courage to stand up when you need to. And I really believe for corporate communities, for corporate culture, it's a phenomenally powerful toolkit
Mm.
for for really focusing yourself on the things that are important. A lot of organizations talk about culture and they put the words up on the wall and then they never revisit it.
Right, right.
And we're trying to do that differently. And I really think that my Stoic practice has really helped to put it into practice and to try to actually make it something that is tangible and real.
Mm, yeah. And you've also worked with veterans, I believe. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
So when I left my company before I started Mission Edge, I spent a year. So I left my company in part because I had, what I write about in the Virtue Ethos, my what I call my obituary moment. I think it's probably something a lot of people go through where they're like, "Hey, if I write my obituary, what is it going to say?" And I didn't think it was going to say what I wanted it to say, and I realized that I have to get on a new path. So I quit my company and I took a year, and I spent a year volunteering and just kind of bouncing around trying to figure out what do I want to do with the second part of my career. And I started volunteering with some veterans organizations and kind of fell in love with the community and what challenges they were having in transition, in particular, getting out of the military. This was in the early 2010s, 2012s. So there was the military was frequently deployed and people were getting out and they were kind of
Mm,
just really struggling with this whole kind of transition from a job with has tremendous amount of purpose to something that has little purpose unless you create it. And how do you identify that fundamental transition from uniform to the civilian world? And although I had not served in the military, I just kind of really felt like I had some I've been through a lot of transitions in my career, so I felt like I had some value to add. And then I had a lot of connections in the community I could connect people to. And my first book, my first nonfiction book, The Stoic Transition, was really about taking Stoic principles with all these veterans that I was sort of mentoring and trying to create some structure around controlling what you can, but also doing the work and also, focusing your perspective on the glass half full as opposed to half empty. You may not get exactly what you want coming out, but if you get with the right culture and you get an opportunity to thrive, you will create something of value around it. And there's just a lot of Stoic concepts that seem to resonate with the people I was talking to. So I thought I'll just write a short guide and give it away and try to help people to get started on this journey.
yeah, well, maybe that leads towards your books, which I'd be interested to hear you chat about. I know the Stoic Transition, the Stoic Edge, and more recently the Virtue Ethos Handbook. Could you talk about what you learned from writing these books and kind of what you hope that your readers may learn from these?
Yeah, the Stoic Edge really was a kind of autobiographical in a lot of ways. I was using it as therapy for myself and trying to kind of figure out how do I talk about using Stoicism to manage specific situations or specific emotions. So the chapters are really focused on, there's a chapter on overcoming resistance. There's a chapter on imposter syndrome. There's a chapter on fear of failure. There's a chapter on guilt and shame. There's a chapter on anger. And I kind of approached it like with a lot of my own story around like, hey, I struggle with this, and here's how I kind of use Stoicism to kind of manage it with some ideas around how you can kind of start to put it in practice, in your own life for these specific. And the chapters are, 8 or 9 pages each. They're just a touchstone for kind of how you would use Stoicism to kind of deal with these certain emotions. And then I used my own experiences as kind of, example. And then I started sort of socializing a bit, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is me. I need this. I'm going to, I've underlined the chapter on guilt and shame so much. I need to buy a new copy because I can't read it anymore." I mean, that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should publish this and put it out there. And so I did. And then, and so I learned a lot around, you know, kind of Stoicism as a prescription for certain challenges, but I was sort of left thinking a lot about virtue and trying to figure out how do you just generally put virtue into your life as an ethos? Like, how do you create a structure and a process around like just thinking about virtue on a daily basis? And so I started writing the Virtue Ethos, and I kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole in psychology, because I started realizing that my own story was really that it wasn't until I kind of got clear on who I was as a person and what I really wanted was I able to really come to the table and embrace virtue in the way that I really needed to. So the theory really being that, we all kind of put on, and this actually is a really appropriate for veterans too. We all put on a costume, in life. And, we grow up and we create this persona that is based on what we think we're supposed to be, or maybe, it's a lot of it is related to familiar pressure or things that we've been through or trauma or whatever. And we kind of show up in this way, and this is who I am. But it might not really be who you are. It might just be the costume that you put on. And I found myself faking it a lot in life and kind of appearing to be something but I was never really comfortable with. And what I realized is that it's very hard to fake virtue. So if you're not really who you are on a daily basis, it's very hard to show up with wisdom and with courage, when you're kind of like playing a role. So when the down times, you'll kind of slip. And so part of my catharsis was figuring out who I really was and what I really cared about. And I kind of talk a little bit I'm not a Jungian psychologist, but I talk about Jungian psychology in the book a little bit around, finding your authentic self, kind of dealing with your shadow, which is a lot of the repressed stuff in your past. And, kind of how do you show up more authentically so that you can start to put a virtue ethos kind of into practice. And so that's kind of what I've written most recently, and it's a lot of short chapters, a lot of discussion around what is wisdom really, what is courage really, and trying to make it as approachable and tangible as possible. And then there's a lot of exercises in the book around like how do you kind of start to create this ethos in your life, and if people get help to get started, I think it's useful.
Yeah. I think, as I was mentioning earlier, I feel that sometimes the virtues aspect of Stoicism is a little underrepresented or not well understood. I also think people get scared of the word virtue because they hear it and they think all these other things. I mean, how do you describe
Yeah,
virtue to people?
it's so funny. I'll tell you this little story, because I said to my wife, I said, I think I'm going to write a book about virtue. And she looked at me and she said, she said, you're going to write a book about virtue? And I'm like, I don't know whether to be offended here or not, but, and I think I knew what she meant. It's like virtue sounds like, some religious sort
Yeah.
of Catholic kind of concept. And I kind of explained to her, I kind of define it as, it's about just doing good. It's about, it's what you do. It's doing the thing that is good, and it really is very simple. It's about excellence, and whatever it is that you're doing. So it doesn't have to be this crusty old, kind of Catholic, concept. It's really just about showing up and doing good things in the world. And the Stoics have, the structure of virtue being these kind of, wisdom, courage, temperance, or discipline, and justice. I mean, they're so intercleaved together, and
Yes.
they really kind of reinforce each other. So it's a beautiful thing if you can kind of look at it as a whole and not say, "Oh, I've got to be wise today." Well, it's like, no, you have to show up with intention and try to look at things as clearly as you can. And then when you have to show up, you need the courage to do so. And then you don't want to show up too much, so you need the temperance to not overreact. And then whatever you do, you need to be thinking about the greater good. Like, those are things that we probably deal with everyone deals with on a daily basis. They just haven't put words to them.
Yes, yeah.
And the Stoics, I think, were very clear, like virtue is everything. Like, I think the modern interpretation of Stoicism has focused a lot on, the obstacles, the way, and, the dichotomy of control, which are all kind of, those are concepts that are related to the virtues, right? But they aren't in them. They can't really exist separate from, the virtue kind of structure.
Yeah, yeah. What do you hope readers will take away from your handbook?
Um, I think to me, if you again wake up every day thinking I'm going to be the best person I can be today, and I'm going to try to, be better than yesterday, and I'm going to try to live. I'm going to try to, operationalize virtue today in some way. And know that it's not really like a mystery. It's just, it's probably just being who you really are. And that's one of the reasons why there's this whole, Jungian, light Jungian analysis stuff in there, because if you can strip away your persona and be who you really are and be able to show up that way, virtue is probably going to be easier to deal with than if your ego and your persona are driving you towards ends that are actually conflict with your values. And I think a lot of people live this conflicted, and I lived this conflicted life for a long time. It's like my ego said this and my persona said I was this, but my values really didn't align. And there was a lot of dissonance, and I was in a lot of conflict and was very uncomfortable. And since I've gotten those more aligned, I've been a lot happier and felt a lot more fulfilled. So, it's not easy work. It's hard work, but if you can kind of bring it into a system where it's tangible and maybe it's not that overwhelming, you can start the process of kind of learning more about yourself.
Yeah, and I think there is a value to kind of training yourself along those lines. It's one thing to just think about it and imagine about it, but sort of training yourself, and I think a handbook is a good way to do that for sort of developing some practices around it. I don't know too much about Jung, but now you've piqued my interest. Um,
Yeah, it's really fascinating, this whole model of the psyche and, kind of the inner world and the outer world. There's a lot of consistency with Stoic concepts in Jungian psychology, actually. And I'm sure Donald Robertson probably would be the one to talk to about it. And I'm a layman really at all this, but I just how I've applied it to my own life is kind of what I've tried to kind of put forward.
yeah.
And I do think, the handbook, Epictetus wrote the Echiridion, which is handbook, so the handbook sort of made sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely echoes back to him and to the practice of our kind of ancient inspirations. Well, thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate this conversation. It's been really cool to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Keep up the great work, and I'm glad we're connected.
Thank you. Appreciate that.